Hello world, I'm Evan Gudmestead, an instructor of application and web development at Rankin Technical College. In this coding tutorial, I'm going to show you how to build your own do-it-yourself shopping cart for an e-commerce type of store web application built in ASP.NET MVC. The reason that I think this is an awesome project to learn from is as a web developer, the whole explosion of the web came in the early 90s primarily because of e-commerce. And so learning to build yourself an e-commerce shopping cart application seems really like a natural fit to learn as an aspiring web developer, as so many of my students are. Let me go ahead and show off what we will be building and hit some of the learning objectives. And so in this shopping cart application, what we have is user accounts. And so what you can see is a registration system. It's all saved to a SQL Server database. I can go ahead and register an account, or I can log in an account that already exists. And so as I log in here, what you will see is that users have the ability to add products to a shopping cart. And so we can add a couple products, and you can see my shopping cart is keeping track. We can update quantities, keeping track of the number of items in the cart. It's keeping an order total. We can check out with a little mock shipping address, place an order, so we have a pending status. We can view all my orders, and so my Rankin account now has its first order, but it also keeps track of on a per user basis. If I log in with my Gmail, I already have a couple of separate orders placed last week. So we have products, we have orders. All of this information is being saved in a SQL Server database. We have user accounts. This is all built in .NET MVC. And so there's a lot that you will learn. Now, just to get into some of the specific objectives, okay? So again, this is a build a do-it-yourself e-commerce shopping cart. Just to hit couple high-level objectives. Okay, we will go through and you will become familiar with the fundamental MVC design patterns and conventions. We will implement Tailwind for the styling and the mobile responsiveness. We'll create user accounts with ASP.NET identity. So there's an identity system for saving our user accounts, and we get into some permissions as well. We will implement Entity Framework for our SQL Server database and the tables within that database. There's about, 10 tables or so on our database. We'll build a shopping cart that persists, via HTTP request. HTTP is stateless, so we need a way to maintain state, and we use .NET Session State for that. We will save users' orders into a database. We will code view models. We'll bind our HTML Razor view controls to controller actions. We'll implement view components. And just as a getting started, you will need Visual Studio Community. It's for free on a Windows operating system. You'll need a little bit of prerequisite knowledge with C#. Hopefully you've been exposed to C# before, because I don't dive into the depths of teaching C# here, as well as HTML or CSS. And it would be helpful, although not necessary, if you've been exposed to Bootstrap or Tailwind and you have an understanding that by applying classes to your HTML elements, how that affects your styling. So let me dive into the UML diagram so we can begin to understand the database structure, and then we'll get into some code. Now, the main thing to highlight about this entity relationship diagram, this is the database diagram for the system that we're building, is that we are going to highlight both many-to-many relationships and one-to-many relationships in this application. And so the many-to-many is between products and orders. And so it would be safe to say that a product can be on multiple orders, on many orders, and then an order can have many products, thus creating your many-to-many relationship. And in database design, what you do is you break down a many-to-many with a join table in between. Okay, so we have a many-to-many relationship between product and orders with a join table in between. And then we have one-to-many relationships where an application or a user can have many orders, and a category can belong to many products. And so in this database itself, we just have multiple types of cardinality, as it's referred to, between the tables. And that's the thing to highlight on our database design. This web application will serve as a good blueprint or template for your own e-commerce shopping web application. But I just want to highlight that this is a starting point of which you can build on top of if you want to have that base shopping cart web application kind of blueprint. That's what this is. I also want to highlight that I will provide access to the source code in the GitHub and a GitHub repo. So if you're familiar with that, you can definitely check out my source code, and you can copy and paste whatever chunks of it as you will. You'll notice this is a good sized project, thousands of lines of code. So hand typing everything might be a little bit much. However, you do have that option to hand code everything, as I know that helps commit to memory. When you actually code it from scratch, that's the point of building your own shopping cart from scratch, is you want to get under the hood and understand how this can be built. So without any more talk, here is the source code. Here's the building of this MVC shopping cart. So as we get into this, I will note that this is Visual Studio 2026 with the ASP.NET template installed. When you run the installer, you definitely need to select the .NET, ASP.NET, so that when you create a new project, that you have the right project templates. I like to start from empty because that reinforces the conventions that are there in inside of MVC. There's a lot of convention in MVC, and starting from a template site, it does a lot of the work for you, so I don't like that work. I like to start from empty a little bit more. And I also don't like all the bootstrap that's built in. You guys know my preference. I view it more modern. Library is Tailwind over Bootstrap. That's my personal opinion and my understanding of where the industry is going. So we're going to start with .NET Core Empty, and I will store this in a folder with my name on it, and I'm just going to store this in labs. We're in chapter 5, and I place the solution in the same, and I will just call this one-to-many demo. .NET 10, HTTPS is good. Let that spin up. Okay, so we're starting with this web application. First thing that I like to do is enable MVC, and so that's add controllers with views. Okay, this is going to enable the MVC pattern. I also like static files in the www root, so that is going to be app.use static files. And then there's a default controller route, and that's going to be the home controller, and the index view is kind of the default, followed by an optional ID. So we can get by with that default routing. So map default controller. Now we just do the old putting everything in folders for MVC. We have models, views, controllers. I'm sure there's a faster way of doing it. Nia was kind of showing me some of the command line stuff that she got into. Models, controllers. And under views, there's a shared folder. And the shared is where we put our layout template view. So I'm going to add a layout file. Razor layout underscore layout. So what's nice is that these files are just kind of, so here's the shell of our application. I'm going to change this shell here in a little bit. All the content for our views go inside of render body. Our views also have a view imports. So I'm going to add a view import. I'll come back to this file. Now, this is not, view imports is underneath views, not underneath shared. Layout is underneath shared. These other two files are in the root of the views folder. And there's view imports, and there is view start. So let's add the view start. Razor view start that says to use the layout. Come back to view, come back to that, come back to that. Okay. Next up, I'll bring in some Tailwind. And so in this class, we bring in Tailwind. We're going to have a CSS file that's in www.root. So our static files go in www.root. Of course, we got our CSS or JavaScript, what have you. And I'm going to add a new CSS file here. And it is my practice. I could just call this site.css. And ultimately, this site CSS is just importing Tailwind. Okay. Now we bring in Tailwind with a little node command. And so in my developer PowerShell, which I believe is under Tools, command line terminal, developer PowerShell. I'm in the right folder, the one-to-many demo. I'm going to do an npm init. This is going to get my package.json eligible for some JavaScript dependencies. The command now to install Tailwind. If we go to tailwindcss.com, and I'm going to get started with the Tailwind CLI. The Tailwind CLI is the simplest and fastest way to get up and running with Tailwind from scratch. The command is right here. npm install Tailwind CSS Tailwind CLI. Paste that in. Okay, so now we should be able to import Tailwind, and because of the way Tailwind works, it minimizes all of the styling, so you're only using the parts of Tailwind that you need to use. And so there's a little bit of a compiling process. You compile your CSS into an output file that's, again, a minimized output file. And the way that I've showed my class to do this is in the, if you double click the project, you go into the settings file for your project, and you essentially tell this settings file, and this is a copy and paste job for me. If you guys are following along, you guys can copy and paste, or if you have to type it, you can type it manually, but boy, there's a lot of room for typo. So here's a good chunk of code. But if we kind of highlight this, first off, we start with our site CSS file, so the name of that matters. And when we build, when we do a build, or when we publish this on Azure, it's going to essentially run this npx command on our developer's box, and it's going to use the input of our site CSS and send it out as output CSS, and we're going to minify. So this is done on a build, and then what we have to do from this point on our view, on our layout, is we have to link to that output file. That output file isn't there right now, but we just need a simple link tag on our layout. So here you can see, go to the root of our static files, CSS, output CSS, and if I didn't forget a step, and I do a build, as I'm doing now, it should produce that output CSS file for us. And we should be up and running with Tailwind. One build succeeded. There's our output CSS. And there's our minimized CSS that we're really using. Now, we're not really using anything yet. And so I like to kind of start with a layout, an application layout, and this is, you know, just a shell of the page that's built with Tailwind. Right now, the shell of the page is just HTML5, and so I've done this once or twice with my class, and I always got to find the right. I believe I go into templates. No. You're going to have to pay for templates. Like I always got to click on, let's go to components, and then I go to application UI, and then I click on a stacked layout. So that's where I get there. Here's the URL, but this will at least give me a shell of a page with a nav bar, kind of a header, dashboard, and a content area. Right, you have to click on code and copy this. And this is, again, this is our shell of Tailwind. And I'm just going to paste that in here. So I'm going to delete that, paste, and now your content is at render body method. Okay, and if I scroll up here, there's a few instructions that I'm going to follow. First off, include this script tag, so let's bring that in. We put a double @ right there. On our HTML, we need these classes. So on the HTML tag, oh, yep, there's our HTML. So HTML, paste that, and on the body we need the H of full, the class of full. Okay, so now if I control F5, delete this line, so that build error goes away. I did something too fast. Let's save, let's build. Let's close. Build succeeded. Start without debugging. Let me fix this. Well, suffice to say, it's not in a working mode if you don't have controllers and views. So let's add our home controller. Silly teacher, home controller. Let's add the home subfolder underneath views. Let's add the index razor view and h1 welcome home. Save. Don't forget the controller view. You're still building an MVC. Silly teacher. There you go. Welcome home. We got a shell of a dashboard, whatever that says. We got a nav bar, which we're going to be tweaking this nav bar. We got this drop down with some options. We're going to change that. Okay, now we're ready to get into some new stuff, because this is something my class has seen before. But what we're going to do is we're going to install some dependencies, right? We've worked with Entity Framework, and there was 2 NuGet packages to bring in. So under Tools, NuGet Package Manager.
We have to do this if we want to build a database for each project.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And if I browse, I should have these Microsoft packages. Here's my 2 packages you need for Entity Framework. And this is the version 10 because we're in .NET 10, so we should work with that. So these are that's my SQL server. And I also need .tools. So additionally, we are going to be bringing in user accounts. So there are 2 packages for that. Microsoft.ASP.NET Core .identity.entity framework core. So here's our first identity package we're going to install. And the second one, a little bit shorter, .NET Core Identity UI. So these are the 2 dependencies to bring in with the NuGet Package Manager. Now if I go to installed and I clear that filter, I should see 1, 2, 3, 4 packages brought in. So now I'm ready to start working with identity and user accounts. So there is, in this identity system, there is a user account class. There is a class called identity user. Okay, so there is a class called identity user, and identity user is our user account. And so I'm going to start by creating a model. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a class called application user that has a parent, right? This is C# inheritance, okay? That inherits from identity user. Of course, I need to bring in the package that we just installed for that to be recognized. So you get a lot out of the box with identity, including a lot of user fields. But as something as basic as like a user's first name, believe it or not, First name is like not a field that that is built into the identity user class. So if you want to add new fields, this is why you would do something like application user. I also am doing this. It's like if you want to add first name, you could do this. I'm also doing this to very explicitly show you that I'm going to have a one-to-many relationship. So in my user account, my users will have a list of type order. Now I don't have an order. Okay, so this is not going to compile because I need to generate this type. Let me go ahead and right click, add a new class called order. Okay, so then that will be a recognized type. Okay, so this one line right here, and Anna did this yesterday when she was talking about some of her code. This right here creates an entity framework, creates a one-to-many relationship between the user and an order. So one user can have a list of orders, many orders. One user, many orders. So it's kind of nice because all you have to do is take the C# list collection. You guys are all familiar with lists, and if you add a list as a property, this is a list of orders. That will create a one-to-many relationship for you. So I did this just to be explicit and to show off that one-to-many. So one user can have many orders. If I go into an order, well, what does an order have? We're going to give an order an ID. Okay, so this is the primary key of this order table. When we get into the database, it's going to have a date. So we're going to have a date property, some sort of financial, like total amount. And then we're going to have a navigation property. It says, hey, an order will belong to one user. And the way that you identify which user it is with this foreign key user ID. And so again, a user has many orders, and an order has one user. So that's that one-to-many relationship. Now, I kind of jumped ahead a little bit, right? Because I didn't quite finish like what goes into view imports. View imports has a couple of things. Using my one-to-many demo namespace dot models, and I want my tag helpers to be available on my views. So all this file, it says, hey, all those classes inside of this models namespace, make those classes available to our views. Of course, we need that, and also all those tag helpers that are not normal parts of HTML. But you can add tag helpers to your anchor tags and things like that. Make those available to our view. So that's good. And then our view start. Okay, we don't need to change that. So I just wanted to finish that off. Kind of the next step is to create our application context, our context file. Remember, the context file is really that file that will link the database tables to your C# code, right? This is called Code First Entity Framework. It's called Code First Entity Framework because we start with our C# models. That's our code first, and it will generate database tables based on these models. So Code First Entity Framework. We have to wire up the rest of Entity Framework. There's a few things there. In app settings, this is where you define a connection string. So of course you need to know where is the database going to be stored and what are the credentials to connect to the database. So this, again, I'm going to kind of copy paste this. Lots of room for typos here. If I kind of zoom out, right, if you have to type it, you can kind of pause this in the video and type this out. This is saying, hey, my connection string has a name of default connection. You could give it a different name. That's just the name of my connection string, and it says, hey, use my local SQL Server database. Under View, SQL Server Object Explorer. If you open up your SQL Server Object Explorer, the way SQL Server works is you install instances of SQL Server. And so I have 2 instances of SQL Server running on my machine, and they both have different databases under them. Right? So here's my databases that are running under this local DB. So I think of local DB as the free version of SQL Server. SQL Server, you could definitely pay for SQL Server if you have so many records. Of course, the more data you want to store, Microsoft will charge you for storing that in their enterprise software. But local DB has its limitations, but it's really great for developers. It's really great for you to get started. So this is our free SQL Server called MSSQL Local DB, right? That's our instance name. So this is the version, this is our instance name, and then this is our database name. I'll just call this CRUD, one-to-many demo, one-to-many DB, one-to-many database. That's going to be the name of my database in SQL Server. It is a trusted connection, and to be honest with you, I've always typed that, but I'm not exactly sure what's the consequence of leaving that off or what that does, but that's always part of it. To be fully honest, I haven't dug into that one. Okay, so connection string made. Let's make our context model. So again, this is going to be a C# class. I'm going to call this application DB context. This is already going to be a little bit different than what you guys did in Chapter 4. In Chapter 4, you remember you had a parent called DB context. You know, there's a different parent now. The parent is identity DB context. Identity DB context, because you're bringing in a bunch of identity tables, okay, that you'll see here in just a second, right? So the syntax for this is a primary constructor, DB context options, application DB context, options, inherit from, not DB context, but identity DB context. It's the generic version using my application user options. Whew, that's a long line. And what I'm going to add, so this basically, this line right here, because we're inheriting from this, it's going to bring in all those identity tables that I was showing you earlier. And we're just going to add one table to that list of tables, and that's the orders table. So our DB context is already just a little bit different than what you guys saw last time. And remember, application user is our user class that inherits from the built-in identity user. So that's our DB context. Now we get to inject that DB context into our controllers so that we can ultimately tie into our database. So this is dependency injection. We've seen this a time or two. And so let's do a couple of things here in my program CS. First off, we're going to tell our DB context file to use the connection string inside of our app settings. Okay, that's what that line does. This line tells our DB context to connect to the database via our default connection string. And then this line is our dependency injection, DI, for our context, DB context. So this will allow us to inject our application DB context into our controllers so that our application can work with users from the controllers and the views and the like. Now, two new lines that are hard requirements for identity. After the use static files, we tell our app to use authentication and use authorization. So those are just part of the identity requirements. And last but not least, there are some Razor pages that are built into this identity system. You guys remember that login page and the register page? Those are actually pages that can be provided for us through this system. So we're going to use those kind of built-in pages to help us register new users and log in and log out and all sorts of things. There's like a million things you can do in this system, and I'm just gonna, again, we're just gonna touch the surface in today's little demo here. Okay, so now what we'll do is we'll actually get a user. We still don't have a database yet, just worth noting. We're at a point where I could do an add migration init, and this is going to, let me go ahead and create the database, and we'll just look at it before we put a user into it. So this is the initial scaffolding that's taking place to create the database using the connection string. And it'll generate a file. No seed data. No seed data on this one. But you're gonna notice this looks a little bit different. Now I got all these different tables, right? ASP.NET users, claims, so on and so forth. If I keep scrolling, notice there's a create table orders. There's my orders table. Okay, so to actually run this migration file, use the update database command, and that'll actually create my database, and we can just look at it before we put a user into it. All right, let's go into here. Let's refresh. Here's my one-to-many database. There are my tables, including my orders table and my users tables. So that's good. We can close, let's just close everything. Close all tabs, get it nice and clean. With identity, check this out. This is, some people like the scaffolding features here. Some people don't. Let me add, so I'm going to right click my project and I'm going to add a new scaffolded item. Anytime you see the word scaffolding, it's generating code for you. So I'm going to click on identity. So I am scaffolding identity code. By the way, this is very similar to those shad CN components. Everything here is customizable. You get access to the source code. So this is scaffolded code for you, but you can hack it up whatever way you want. None of this is off limits. You have full access to the code. Well, look at all this stuff that identity has built in. Logging in with two-factor. Forgot password. Login, we're going to want. I'll generate the logout and the register. So I'm just going to create pages, individual pages to do those three things. I'm going to select my DB context, application DB context, and click add. Now what this is going to do, and this will be a new concept for you guys, it's going to create what's called an area. An area is a kind of a permission-based thing where now you might need to set up permissions to get into an area of the website. So this is where that authorization, if you need to be authorized to get into an area. Notice here, and this is jumping ahead a little bit, but this area is for identity, pages, and here's the account, login, log out, and register. Okay, so these pages, notice these are just CSHTML. I'm also going to point out that these are Bootstrap. This is full of Bootstrap. So that's why I said upgrade Bootstrap to Tailwind, because this is all call medium 4. Those are Bootstrap classes. So I don't love that. Let me show you how to create navigation links to get to these areas. All right, so let me look this up real quick. I also want to point this out. This under my shared folder, there's now a login partial. This login partial .cshtml says if a user is signed in, show them the sign out link. Otherwise, show them the /account/register link. /account/login. Well, here's /account/login. And so, again, if I kind of go to this login partial, I'll show you how you can actually use this. Let's go to my layout. Notice here, here are my, if I were to look at my page, these are going to be in the nav bar kind of on the left, but then there's a drop down menu on the right. And so what I did, at least when I mocked this up, is I wanted, depending on whether my user is logged in or not, I kind of want those options to show right here, right, in this little drop-down user icon. Okay, and you could totally customize this completely differently. This is what I did. Okay, so this under here we see your profile, settings, and sign out. So let's find that over here. Here's the profile drop-down, and here's my here are my links. By the way, L menu, that's got a little Spanish naming going on, whatever. So if I just delete this, and you can actually bring in this partial name equals underscore login partial. Now remember, this login partial is just a big if else inside of an unordered list. Again, I don't think the styling is going to be quite right, but basically I'm going to see 2 links if I'm not logged in and 2 other links if I am logged in. And so this login partial came with it, and I deleted the links that were there, and I really, if I go back to my login partial, there's a whole nother unordered list there. I don't know how that's going to look. It's going to look ugly. Plus, none of those Bootstrap nav bars classes work. So we got to clean it up with the styling. Not the point. Let's just see if my links are there. Go away, go away. Okay, well, perfect. I'm not logged in, so it's showing me the register login link. If I click on register, okay, good. This is a problem. Why? Again, everything wants to use Bootstrap, and the problem is that there's a script tag. If I go, let's see, if I would have read the error message a little bit closer. These are like optional jQuery scripts. And you can bring these jQuery scripts in or not on any individual page. And that was nice if you're going to use jQuery. But right now, it's like the pages you need to use these or not. I basically say make these optional. And so in my underscore layout, I go into my underscore layout and I say, hey, the script section is not a hard requirement. So you don't need to bring those scripts in. If I would have read that error message a little closer, I could have explained that better, but nonetheless, that's the fix for at least one error message. Okay. Because I tried to get to a Razor view and it was trying to use a script section. You needed to say, hey, you don't need it. So now if I go to register, cool, we got a register page. Again, Bootstrap class is very ugly. We can fix that. Go to login page. We also have a login page. So let's register an account. By the way, identity account register is the URL that takes us there. Let me just create my Gmail account. Okay, password saved. This is something I'll show you how to fix, but it's like, hey, I should email you, but because we don't have email set up, click here to confirm your account. So now I click here, thank you for confirming your email. Now if I log in, I should be able to log in with my Gmail. Click the login button that doesn't look like a button. And now I'm logged in. Hello, Evan Gudmestad at Gmail. So we now have logins working. And if I type in a wrong password, we get invalid login attempt. Okay. Just to show my database then, if I view the data in my users table, there is my evangudmestad at gmail.com. And here is my hash password. Cool. We now have users. How can your users have orders? That is the next step. So if I kind of minimize this will be new for you guys as well. Again, I think like anything else, once you know a little bit about MVC and you know how to do CRUD operations once, you can do CRUD operations and MVC a couple more times and get used to all the different conventions that are there. But check this out. I'm going to add a controller. This is a different option. MVC controller empty is what we normally select. MVC controller with views using Entity Framework. Remember we talk about that scaffolding? So I'm going to say, hey, make a controller with views using Entity Framework for my order model using this DB context. Generate views. Use the layout page. This makes it plural, orders controller. Just for the sake of this, you could do order controller. Because this is my home singular controller, I'll make this my order controller.
It's going to come with Bootstrap, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to come with Bootstrap. You don't have to use it. Again, I recommend not using this until you know how to do this first without. But if we look at this, it injects our application context, right? We can get a list of orders. We can get our details page. We can create an order. We can post a new order. So this is a get, HTTP get. This is an HTTP post. Of course, edit operations, edit posting. So it's a get for the edit, and this is a post for the edit. And here's your delete get operation, and here's your delete post. And again, right off the gate, I'm going to tell you I customized and like how this worked out of the box. So of course we can customize it. So we don't have our links up to date, but we know that this is the order controller index method. Okay, so again, no styling, but here's a create new order, and here's a table that is very terribly formatted. Table headings. But if I create a new order, again, styling's not there. And it's also giving me my user ID in a drop-down list. So for me, I'm like, well, I don't want my user ID to be in a drop-down list. I want the logged in user to create the order, right? That makes more sense. Instead of being in a drop-down list, it's not really the point of this demo, but just to show you the code that can tweak that. So that's in the controller, the order controller on the post for creating a new order. So let me go back to that. And edit, here's create post. So notice we have an order object, and so I set the user ID of the order to get the currently logged in user. This way. That way I don't need to accept the user ID from the form. That's what this is doing. This is saying, hey, get the order ID from the form, the date from the form, the total, and this user ID. This will override that, but just to be sure, we can actually delete it from here. And then I took this if statement off temporarily because I was getting a validation error. Just took this off. Let's just assume that the validation is I might need to come back and fix that, but right now that's where my demo project was. So now let's save that. And then in the create view, I don't even need the drop down list anymore. So let me go to the order create, and here's my form group for the user ID. I don't need that anymore. So I comment that out. So again, it generates some code. You're going to have to fix a lot of the code that it generates. So let me log in a user. First off, this is my Gmail. And now that I'm logged in, if I go to order index, create new order today for an amount, create, we now have the ability to create one order, create a second order. Okay, so there's my user ID of C6 of my Gmail account. Let's log out my user. Let's register a new user. Let's put in my work email. Confirm the account. Log in as the account. Okay, I'll fix the link so that we should be able to navigate to order index. If I create new order, yesterday, okay, now we see different user IDs. One user can have many orders. Create new, yesterday, order ID, 1000. One user can have many orders, as I've demonstrated. That's a one-to-many relationship, all with Entity Framework inside of a SQL Server database. Let me hit my objectives and make sure. After this, we're really just talking about styling with Tailwind. And you guys know what AI tools are really great at is styling with Tailwind. I'll show you how to do that. So we did this, we did this, we did this, we did this, we did this. Authorization areas, check this out. Now that I've got this area, actually, I'm going to do, I don't need it there. I'm going to go to the order controller. And at the top of my order controller, this is the easiest way to lock it down. You must be logged in. In order to get to the order controller, you must be logged in. That's what authorize will do for us. Again, you can definitely get way more into the weeds here, but this is the easiest way to say you got to be logged in to access this. So that's kind of cool. So now if I just try and navigate to my /order index, notice it actually takes me to the login page instead. And when I log in, it should redirect me to my orders. So that's pretty cool. Let's cheat code. Let's Copilot. Format my order index.cshtml with Tailwind v4 classes. Unfortunately, Tailwind, remember, Tailwind laid off 75%, 3 out of the 4 developers, because AI is so good at styling with Tailwind. And so I take all I did is I take that same page that was there with Bootstrap, tell it to use all the Tailwind classes instead. And now, when I log in, and I go to /order index, right? Now I've got a pretty looking table. Not bad for 0% effort, right? But it's all formatted with Bootstrap instead. So really what you have to do is you just do the same thing for the edit page, right? Because this edit view just needs to be Tailwind classes. This details view just needs to be Tailwind classes. This delete view just needs Tailwind classes. This login page just needs Tailwind classes. So they can vary, again, AI, do that, add Tailwind classes to all of my views. Quite simple. I don't need to show you guys that, since if you do it once, you do it 100 times. Let's go back to my layout. And all I'm going to do is kind of change this main navigation area, these main links here. Right? So I'm going to change, first off, I just need 2 links. This is going to say home. And using the tag helpers, I'm going to say ASP controller, home controller, ASP action, index. And then this becomes ASP controller order, ASP action, index. I'm going to type this right, INDEX. Now keep in mind, these classes have like the active class, right? Versus, and then this says orders. Cool. I think this is important for you guys because I know you're going to want user accounts on your UML diagrams. And, you know, in your final projects. So here's my orders page. Here's my home page. Of course, here we got to log in. When I've taught this in the past and I got to this point, students wanted to like make their own user accounts. They wanted to like reinvent the wheel for this login system that already existed. So instead of like having you make a UML diagram and now you're making your own user accounts, no. There's a built-in user account. I just wanted to show you enough to get started using it. You don't have to finish it today. We got plenty of time to continue to learn this. But I didn't want you creating your own user accounts in your UML diagrams. You guys will just have either you'll have for your users, just call your user application user, and that'll be the class that you'll create for your user. And if you want roles, you know, then you can kind of model that as well. But ultimately, the roles are another table that's a foreign key, like there's a roles table. So ultimately, your user account is just the same, and then you put them in their roles. Okay, so I have authorization areas, I have authentication, CRUD operations on orders. So I covered all those check boxes, and so I'll stop this video here. So the current state of what we're looking at of this web application is a one-to-many application where one user can have many orders. And so this was a prior demo that I did last month, and one user can have many orders. But you know, as things do, it was like, okay, let's evolve on this application and make it more practical, more useful. And so what I wanted to do is have a more complex database structure along with a shopping cart, because we're on the chapter dealing with .NET session state and how to maintain stateful data. Specifically, we're going to have a shopping cart of products that can maintain the state of that shopping cart across multiple page requests. And so I kind of wanted to show you guys something, and I have this a little bit separate here. So this application is going to just, you know, be a little bit broader. It's going to be an e-commerce application, and I want to show you the database structure a little bit. And if I minimize this window here, you can now see 5 database tables, right? So before there was not as many tables. We had the .NET users table, and then what you're looking at here is the primary key along with other fields related, and these are the data types on the right, and these are the SQL Server data types, right? And so last semester our database was Mongo, and this semester it's Microsoft SQL Server, specifically LocalDB, the free stuff. And just as before, one user can have many orders. So one user, many orders, nothing is changing there. But what an order is changing. Okay, so I'm actually going to change the order model. An order still has a primary key, But an order is essentially going to have a bunch of products, right? So this is where the relationships are different. We've done one-to-many relationships. We have not done a many-to-many relationship. Okay, a many-to-many relationship, you can see that an order has a user ID, but one user has many order items. I'm going to come back to order items because really what I want to focus on is between order and products. It is safe to say, and this is how you view or you talk about cardinality in databases. One order can have many products. Well, that's pretty simple. One order can have many products. It's also the case that one product can belong to many orders, right? So that also makes sense. So you've got a one-to-many, one order can have many products, and one product can have many orders. So that forms a many-to-many relationship. Did you guys know that many-to-many relationships are not considered best practice in SQL Server databases? You do not, when you're designing a database, and you guys, I think some of you listed database design on your resumes. When you're designing a database, many-to-many is kind of not a good practice. So what you do, instead of having a many-to-many, again, I've demonstrated how orders has many products and a product has many orders, okay? Instead of maintaining those direct lines, notice there's no direct lines between orders and products. Notice there's a table in between. This is a new table in between orders and products, and what it does is it breaks up the many-to-many relationship. And so what we have, this order items table, I will commonly refer to this as a join table. Okay, and a join table kind of breaks up that many-to-many relationship. And so in order, one order has many order items, and one product can have many order items. And so what it boils down to is a one-to-many between orders and order items, and a one-to-many between product and order items. So you can see this is a better representation. A product can have many order items, and an order can have many order items. Because these arrows kind of break the symbols up here. Okay, so all that just to say, we're not going to maintain that direct many-to-many relationship between orders and products. Instead, we're introducing what's called a join table, and an order item will have an order ID and a product ID. So order number 1 has ordered product ID number 1. Order ID 1 has also ordered product ID 2. Order ID number 1 has ordered product ID number 3. So you can kind of see how using these foreign key columns, one order 1 has product 1, order 1 has product 2, order 1 has product 3. And then I will maintain, I will create a categories table, and the category, one category can have many products. And so this is the database schema that we're moving towards. Again, it's a more complex schema. Before, our orders just had like order date and order item, but now we actually have a many-to-many relationship that we essentially break out with this order items being a join table. So that is the database schema that I'm going for. And again, really, we're going to change the database today, and we'll look at some products. And then tomorrow, we're going to bring in the shopping cart. So this has to be broken up into a couple pieces here because there's a fair amount. I like to start with the models right now. We have our context file, we have a user with a list of orders, and we have our order class. And so I'm going to start with my models, Again, because this is all using Entity Framework, and I'm going to look at my order class, and I'm going to start making changes. Remember, order ID is the primary key. We've got an order date initializing with today. I'm going to put this little attribute on the total amount. So this little attribute saying that we can have so many places, so many digits, 18 digits, with 2 of them being after the decimal point. So that kind of forces a dollar-like 2 decimal places. I have a user, just as I did before. So an order can have 1 user. If you want, here I implement an order status. And so this is pretty normal. Like, what's the status of your order? Is it shipped? Is it pending? Is it accepted? You know, here's just an enum called order status. That way you don't have what are called, you know, the magic strings. If you were to have an order status that was a string, it could be any value. This is going to force one of 5 values, so that if we create an order status property, so the data type is order status now, that's our enum, and it can only be one of these 5 acceptable values. Notice our default is set to pending. We'll just give an address. So an order will have an address to ship it to. That makes sense. It actually makes more sense to have a street, a city, a state, break it down even further. But for this simple demo, we'll just store it all in one thing here, in one field. And remember that our orders now have a list of order items. One order has many order items. That was on the ERD that I demonstrated, so I need to add this class, the class of order item. To at least get order to compile. Okay. And before I create that join table, because I know that join table is also going to have an order item is a single user and a single product. Back to the ERD, I got it pulled off here. So, a single order and a single product. So an order ID and a product ID. So I got the order ID, but I need to be able to seed some products, and so I can get some product IDs before I ever create order items. So let's do that. Let's create a product model. And by convention, the primary key will be product ID. So that's the primary key. We'll have the product name. Mark it as required. We'll have a product description. We'll have a price. Product price makes sense. Again, it's a decimal data type. 18 digits, 2 of them being acceptable after the decimal point. Makes sense that our products can have image URLs. These can be static URLs on the internet, or they can be local URLs in www root. You can configure image URL. It's a string, and it could be local images or images on the internet. And then just some other miscellaneous fields like how many do we have in stock? A Boolean for, is it an active product or have you retired it? a relationship from product to the category class. We have not created the category class. I'll come into here, create a class called category. A one-to-many class. A product has a single category. Because it has this is the navigation property, and it's also going to have a foreign key property for category. So I think you guys are familiar with the difference between foreign key properties and navigation properties. At least you've seen them before. And last but not least, just as on the order side, we connected order to order items, we're going to connect product to order items. Again, product is connected to order items. So now we can have a proper join table between orders and products. Now join tables very conventionally hold these fields, the foreign keys. They do not have to have their own unique primary key, and they do not have to have additional fields. So this is a join table, and this join table has additional information about the price of the unit on this order. How does that make sense? Well, you might have caught a sale, right? Just because you have a product doesn't mean it has a static price, right? So what is the unit price on that order? Because you might have found a 5% discount code, you found a 10% discount code. Different users have different prices that they pay depending on that. And how many of that quantity also makes sense to say, hey, on this order, this product, how many of that item were sold. So with that being the case, our product is pretty well wired up. Let's go ahead and flesh out category. Really nothing too unique here. I'll just kind of bring them all in. Primary key, category name, a category description, and a category. One category can have many products. So that makes sense there. And last but not least, our order item. Primary key. Per the UML, we have a quantity and a unit price. Quantity, unit price. A couple of foreign keys. Remember, each order item has a single order ID and a single product ID. A couple of navigation properties. And a total price. Now, notice we've seen this not mapped before. Remember, not mapped just says don't save it in the database. And the reason is you don't save this in the database is because it is a simple calculation and it can lead to stale data. The total price will always be the quantity times the unit price. And so since this is simply a computed column, you don't need to store it in the database because, again, storing calculations in the database, if you were to change the quantity, you would also have to change the total price. The quantity of items on an order, for example. So if you had, 1 is the quantity and then the unit price was 20, and then you save $20 as the total price, and then the user changed their mind. They wanted a quantity of 2. I update the quantity to 2. The unit price is still 20, but yet in the database, it's still storing the total price as 20. That total price of 20 would be considered stale data at that point. So that's an example of why, like totals, and things that can just be computed by some simple math, simple multiplication, best practice is to not store those and just calculate those when they're needed, when that data is needed. So that's those are the models, okay? And those are the models to meet the UML diagram. As I recommend with you guys, when you're working on projects, start with the database model. It is an important first step to get a good database model first, right? To kind of start with the end in mind. What is the data that you need to store in the database, and where do you need to store it? How do you need to store it? And how do these tables all need to relate to one another? Okay? This is not NoSQL where you can just store data any which way that you want. This is all very strict rules. They all have primary keys and foreign keys, and they link together through their keys. And it has to work a certain way with this, with normalized databases. So I'll close the ERD for now. And now I need to update my database itself, okay? And so right now, my database is called one-to-many demo, one-to-many DB. Just for this example, I'm just going to change my database. I'm gonna refactor this to be called e-commerce shopping cart demo. Okay, e-commerce shopping cart demo, whatever. I'm changing my database name. Okay, just for this particular, that way it's not conflicting with the other code that I used to get ready for this demo. Okay, shopping cart demo. Now what I have to do is I have to finish off my application DB context. Right now, I've got one table in my database along with identity tables. I only have an orders table as set in this application DB context. I need to update my application DB context to have these other tables that I just created. Remember, I updated orders and I had 3 new tables. Okay, so this is going to create now 4 tables. And I'm going to put a little bit of seed data. I'm going to put a little bit of seed data in here by calling this onModelCreating method. And I probably need one more curly brace here. Okay, so first I'll seed some categories. And then I will seed some products. Now, I'm not going to seed any orders. I'm going to create orders with my users. And when I create an order, it'll create order items. My products. I'm going to configure my image URL to give these a little image. And this is what I did not do ahead of time, but I will unsplash it. You guys are familiar with Unsplash. You can get free images on the internet on Unsplash. It's like Pexels, if you've heard of Pexels. Unsplash is another popular free to get images. So if I got a wireless mouse, and if I copy image address, paste it, you don't need all of it. Like if I trim it here, so width is 881. If I say width of 400, makes it smaller. Width of 100, maybe width of 400, and you can kind of see, you can control a little bit of it with that query there. So I'm going to throw that width of 400 in for my image size. And I'm just going to kind of seed image URLs in my seed data for each one of these. So I got a USB-C hub. USB hub. I'll take this guy, copy image address, paste it in, and trim off the stuff I don't need, and give it the same width of 400. And that's kind of nice. I can just hold down Control and click it, and it should just open it up. So that's good. A cotton t-shirt. Okay, here's our wonderful cotton t-shirt. Copy image address. Last but not least, we got a programming book. Book. A coding book. Okay, for now you're going to be our coding book. We got the matrix falling into a book. Copy image address. And width equals 400. Okay. So, the two-step process, anytime your models significantly change, most of the time your models change, you need to add a migration. Right now, I only have one migration, which is the init migration. It created the identity tables as well as my orders table. But I'm going to add migration. I'm just going to call it shopping cart. Or I'll just call it e-commerce. And again, what this is doing is this is changing our database design. These are the tables. We're adding tables and we're changing columns in our orders table. So this command is an entity framework command. It's available to you because we already installed the entity framework package. The entity identity passkey data requires a primary key to be defined. Let me research this and see what the heck this error message means. I have a suspicion there's an important thing that I left off. I don't know what that error, I didn't look anything up, but I remember we need to call base on model creating model builder. Again, have a gut feeling that that's it. Could be completely wrong. Now we got to build. Okay. All right, so we're adding some columns to orders. We're creating some new tables. And we are seeding some data. So everything is looking good here. And to create this database, we're going to run the update database command. Okay, so now in my SQL Server local DB, if I refresh my new database, which we called shopping cart demo has these tables. We've got a products table. Our products table has our 4 products. Each product has a category ID and an image URL to Unsplash. So 4 products. No orders, no order items. Of course, those will be created. And we've got 3 categories. Okay. So far, so good. Our database is now set up with the tables to support a shopping cart. And we've got some different C# models, some different migrations. The next thing to do is to look at the individual products. And so we need to be able to add the products to a cart just like you would on any e-commerce website. And so I create a product controller. And we enabled dependency injection for our DB context, application DB context. And so our product controller needs our DB context. So I bring in a constructor and inject the application DB context into a local field called _context. Now this is pretty nice because it shows us how to use a primary constructor, which will condense this syntax. All of this will be condensed if we use a primary constructor instead. So this syntax looks a little bit more condensed. Instead of using a default constructor, this is called a primary constructor. So that's a nicer, more condensed syntax. So we are going to, here's our index method. In other words, our main page for products. Here's where we're going to show all of our products. And I'm going to enable searching for a product and filtering for a product. And so this is going to be an asynchronous. So it's going to return a task of action result. That's going to allow us to write async methods. And there's going to have 2 potential, these are 2 not mandatory parameters, but these are nullable parameters, so you don't have to have a category or a search string, but that will allow a user to filter by category or to search in a text box, what is the product you're looking for. All right, so we're going to start off a little link query, getting all of our products and including those products categories that are all your active products, right? Because we said they don't have to be active products. So we start by getting all of your products and say, hey, if there's a category, if the category ID has a value, then also filter by category ID. So a little link statement to filter by the category ID. Same thing if there's a search string. If there's a search string provided from the front end, if there's a search string, if it's not null or empty, then do a .contains, where the name contains that search string. And you look in the product name for what they're querying. Then put the categories inside of view bag. Put the current category inside of view bag. Put the search string inside of view bag and return to the view. Now, because this is, I have to put the keyword async. That's what I forgot. I put the keyword async here, and that makes the await calls happy. Okay, so you can imagine we're getting all of our products out of our database. We're allowing for some filtering. We're filtering by category or by a search string. And then ultimately here, we call the toList. This is where you actually execute the query. So really what you're doing is you're building the query, and you don't execute it until like literally inside of the return statement. You execute it by calling toList async. So that executes your links, your link query, which we called products query, and you send that to the view. So now we are ready to actually look at our products in a web page inside of the views folder. So I need a views add folder for product. And this is the index method. So let's right click, add a view, add a view, simply called the index view. It's a strictly typed model, so we have a model of IEnumerable of type product. So a list of products. IEnumerable is the fancy way of saying a list of products. A little razor block here to set the page title, to get the categories out of view bag, to get the current category out of view bag, and the search string out of view bag. Let's just boot this up and make sure we can get to our view. So it should be /product/index. So if I go /product, okay. So I hit the landing page. You can see the title. So we're in business. And now we get to write some HTML with Tailwind. You could do full CRUD here, like CRUD on your products. I just want to display the products. I don't really need to be able to add a product right now. Maybe I'll come back and add a product later. Okay, so there are the filter controls, like the search box and the drop down of categories that allow you to filter your products. I'm going to come back to those. I'm just going to load all my products first. So here's a big if else. And as you can see, the if else says, hey, if there's no products, if the model doesn't have any, If the model does not have any, you say no products found. I'm going to talk about this SVG real quick. When it comes to your icons, Tailwind icons,
They have some.
well, yes, the creators of Tailwind created their own icon set. They're called hero icons. And so as you can see, hero icons are SVG icons. Familiar with SVG? Benefits of SVG are the following. What are the benefits? Number one, they can scale up infinitely. Like if you guys ever, if you're in digital design classes, SVGs are really popular because you can scale them, and you can build them on your computer, and they can scale up to billboard size, right? They don't become pixelated. So number one, they're scalable, so you can scale them up in size. Number two, they're completely customizable because you can change their colors. You can change, with JavaScript, you can give them animations. Okay, so when it comes to icons, the old way you did icons was like PNGs and images, but SVGs are a more modern approach. You can give them color, you can scale them up. They're lightweight, they're very lightweight. They don't have a big download. And so these hero icons, when you see SVGs in my code, this is where they come from. They come from hero icons, and you could just come right in here and copy the SVG and paste that in to get an icon. So I know we've done different icons different ways. I think I've showed you guys like Font Awesome was an icon set. Bootstrap icon was an icon set. There's like 100 icon sets. You can go a million ways with icons. But SVGs are a good approach. And because these are by the makers of Tailwind,
They work in Tailwind.
yeah, they're very fast, efficient. They'll work in Tailwind, they'll work in HTML. It doesn't matter if you just have pure HTML. So here's our else block. And you can kind of imagine what we're going to do here in the else block is loop through our products. There's a lot of code here. I'll paste it in and then walk through it with you guys. There's a lot of markup. In this else block. Suffice to say, we've got a CSS grid for page layout. We're looping through our list of products. If the product has an image URL, display an image tag with the source attribute equal to the product image URL. So if there's a product URL, put that. I believe these are cards is what they wind up being. Otherwise, if there's no image URL, put a generic SVG as the product image. So if there's a product image, display the image, otherwise don't. Display the product's category name, display the product name, display the description, display the product price, display the quantity. If there's quantity, otherwise say out of stock. For each product, hi. How are you?
I'm good.
Okay, so where we kind of left off after we displayed the image and the quantity is we've got a details link. And so if you want to see a product details, you go to its own page, and that'll be just what we code up next. But here we've got anchor tag HTML anchor tag with these tag helper attributes. And so this tag helper here is the details method on the product controller. So we have to create this details method. And then into that details method, you send the product ID in the ID variable. Again, kind of going back to your default routing, the default controller route takes an optional ID. And so, in fact, you could code that differently, and you guys have seen that. But that's the link here. And then if the quantity is greater than 0, so if you don't have a quantity, you can't add anything to the cart. And so this is the form, HTML form, to add an item to the cart. Okay, and inside of this form, we have a submit button. And inside of that submit button, we've got an image, like well, I can show you what it looks like. Right? It's just this little plus icon and the word add. And so that was the details, right? This is not working because details 1 doesn't exist yet. We haven't coded that, right? Nor does this is an anchor tag, this details button. This add button is a form tag. And when we submit the form, we call this add to cart method in the cart controller, which we have yet to create. Of course, you can't see the add button unless the quantity is greater than 0. Other than that, we got a couple items down here to edit and delete. Edit and delete, because those are CRUD operations on our product. I'm not even worried about CRUD operations on our products right now. We could take those off. And we can bring that in later if we so choose. But I think you guys know how to do CRUD operations based on prior labs and such. So really 2 more activities to do today. Number 1, filtering. So we want to filter by category and we want to filter by keyword, right? Category ID and search. And then we also need to bring in that other method, the details method. So kind of back on our index, let me bring in those controls. The first of which, I'm going to go to the top of my index before I'm looping through the products. Create a big div up here. Flex box in a column format. So we're flexing in a column. And our first form, there's going to be a couple forms on here. We're going to wind up being 3 forms on this page. This form ultimately has an input type of text with the name of search string. You guys are getting a preview of the next chapter because the next chapter is on model binding. And since this is our product controller, this name of search string can be sent in to this parameter here. So if we submit this form, we're going to call the index method, and then this will send in the text, the string value that comes from this name. So basically this name does all the magic. I know there's a lot of code here, but this name will be passed into the method based on the convention that the name attribute for the form can wire up to method parameters. And so this search button will send in a name just to demonstrate it, right? I'll put in a little breakpoint there and spin this up. Okay, so we are on /product page. Okay, so here you could see search string is null, right? So this is just going to get all of our products. I'll hit continue, and there's all of our products. Now I've got a form control to search for mouse. I'm going to click search. It sends me back to the index method. Why? Because that's what we told it to do. We said this form submits to the get method of the HTTP get for the index method. But the difference being this time, if I go back to my product controller and I hover over my search string, I told you the magic name now links up to that parameter. So now search string has the value of mouse. If I hop over that, category ID does not have a value, so we should skip over that. However, now we go into here and we search for the products where the product name contains mouse. So a nice little link query there. And if I hit continue, now you can see it just sends back our individual product. Take that out, hit search, continue, we get all of our products back. So that is how we wire up, they call that model binding, a form control to an action method. And then we just have to do it one more time because that was the keyword search. And then this form, again, it's the same kind of behavior, but this is a select list that will display all of our categories in a select tag, right? So in a drop-down list, we're looping through all of our category names in a drop-down list. And we got our same breakpoint here, so if I hit it again, /product and continue, that's all of our products. And what do we got here? A couple of electronics maybe. So if I hit electronics, now our category ID is 1. So we send in category ID. Let's look at that. So here the option value is the category ID. They select the name, so the selected value and here you go, on change this form submit. So anytime they change the selection, we call a submit method on the form. The name is category ID, and then the value is right here, whatever the category value is. So the value gets passed into category ID. That's why category ID is 1. We can hop over that. Category ID now has value, so that's true. And we update our link query to the appropriate category ID, and we get 2 electronics back. Clothing search. Excuse me. I don't need to hit search. I just need to hit clothing and then hit continue. Clothing. There we go. Continue. There we go. So a little bit of filtering on our method there. The last thing is the details method, right? So there's our index method. Let's bring in details on our product controller. Okay, so ID will be passed in via that link that we created way back here. This is the details passing in the route ID. So ID should have a value, so we can get an individual product. Simple query here. Get an individual product out of our database. Include that product's category, and then return that single product to the view. Couple conditions: if the product doesn't exist, return not found. Return that product to the view. So we should be able to go back here, add a view called details. CSHTML. And this is now I have this nav tag here. Trying to remember why I did that. So here are products. Let me boot this up and see what our breadcrumb nav tag looks like. I don't remember. /product. If I click on details, okay, products, electronics, wireless mouse. First link is products. Second link is the model category. So this is a static anchor tag every time. This is a dynamic link displaying that category of electronics. And then the third link, so that SVG is that /, and then the wireless mouse is that last one right there. So a little breadcrumb, nice little, if you want to go back up to electronics, you can do that. And that'll say product category ID. So we'll get started. Where we're going, where we have left to go, right now we have products, and so I'm showing you the finished product. Obviously our store has images. Right now we don't have this shopping cart feature, so we're going to implement the shopping cart feature. Just as a foreshadow, this is a view model, okay? So we're going to be implementing a view model. When we add products, we can do things like this. Okay, we can, once we're in the shopping cart, we can update quantities. You have to have that many available. Books, you know, if there's not 10 books available, you can't update 10 books. You can update quantities. So we have a shopping cart. It is a session shopping cart, meaning I can click around. I don't lose my cart. Okay, there's a little cart icon up here with a visual indicator showing you how many items are in your cart. This is a little something I haven't taught yet. That is called the view component. We're going to implement that view component. So we have a view model, we have a view component, and we have orders. And so ultimately what that means is, you can clear the cart, but you can proceed to checkout. You're going to need to log in. This is pretty simple, authorization rules. Provide an address. and actually place the order. So this is also a view model. Place the order. Now we have orders, and we can, so this is kind of a order summary page, and viewing the orders, and this is on a per user basis. So we are able to retrieve the orders that user has. And it obviously clears out our shopping cart. I guess worth saying here, if I add one item to my session and I kind of close my session and maybe reboot it, ultimately this is just stored in RAM. So in theory, by closing the browser and reopening the browser, it clears the session. And there you go, it clears the session. Again, I think the next step after you get past session state is you have to get into persistent cookies. And actually, what could you do here? You could save even a temporary cart in a database. Data is cheap, storage is cheap. Save it in a database. I'll tell you a very real world example. I do my groceries on Walmart. I don't know if you guys grocery shop in person or if you whatever. I prefer Walmart will actually deliver your groceries. I'm a big fan. I will load up my shopping cart on the web browser, and then I will go to the mobile app on my phone, and right away the shopping cart isn't there. But give it about 10 seconds to do a database lookup, and even my temporary shopping cart will be retrieved on my mobile app. Okay, so if you're doing like a legitimate e-commerce website, you're not just persisting in your server RAM. Okay, you're going to go ahead and save that off into a database based on your user ID, and then you can hit that database and pull back, persist that. You're not even worried about cookies. Okay, we talk about persistent cookies being long-term storage. No, I'm talking about saving it to a disk, to a hard drive disk in a database somewhere. That's like the kind of the gold standard, if you will. So that's where we're going. It's a fair amount of code, and I'm not gonna maybe describe everything so technically, otherwise we would be here for 5 hours. But as I do, I'll try and describe the code as I go. I am going to make a shopping cart controller. And we're going to bring in the DB context here, the application DB context. Obviously, we're going to be able to hit the database to work with products and things of that nature. And it doesn't have to be a unique session key, but we are going to create sessions to persist data. And so giving that a key, a text value is pretty simple. And then here, again, this is called the constructor. Obviously, it's a method, same name as a class. And I prefer the more modern primary constructor that condenses this. I like this syntax, a little bit cleaner, a little bit less code. You got some syntactic sugar, if you will. And then I'm going to write a method. And it's going to require a little bit of boilerplate. You guys remember the iSession interface is where a lot of the magic happens, and to work with session state. And so there's a little bit of boilerplate code to save objects into session state that I like working with. So I'm going to make a folder called extensions. I'm going to add, misclick. Add a folder called extensions. These are for extension methods. Close that. And then I'm going to make a new class, add a C# class called session extensions. This is verbatim out of the book. And this is what we talked about a little bit during the lecture. And this is going to enable us to save C# objects into the server's memory. Remember, we have to kind of like take our object and convert it into JSON to save the JSON as a string is the process. And so let's bring in this using, and this needs to be a static class to host these static methods. So basically two methods, one called setObject, one called getObject. And these are extension methods. They are extending the iSession interface. So now we have new methods. Any class that implements iSession, you can now call these methods on that class, which enables me back in my cart to save a cart into session. Okay, so that's ultimately what I want to do is I want to save a cart into session. And the code to do that, once you have these extension methods set up, is actually quite simple. I'm going to delete this index method, and I'm just going to write this little helper method called saveCart. And notice here is a session object. Obviously, the session object implements iSession. Therefore, we can call setObject, and we're going to pass in a shopping cart. Notice the shopping cart is a type of cart view model, right? So our data type for our shopping cart, we haven't created this. Let me go ahead and create my folder for my view models. And Nia pointed out the other day, you could put view models as a subfolder under models. And so what's the organizational pattern here? That is a valid place to put view models. You could also put it in the root. For this sake of this example, I'll just put it in the root. But I do think it makes sense to put it as under models as well. But just for clarity and for the sake of this, I'm going to put my cart view model inside of this view model. Are you guys getting comfortable with view models? Like you understand their purpose? Thumbs up.
Yeah.
Domain?
A way of sorting models to be easier to work with on these.
Yes. It's literally in the name. It is the data that you need for a page. What is the data you need for an individual page? It's a view model. If it's the data you need for a database table, that's called a domain model, or what we've just been calling, our models in our model folder. So if I look at my view model, and again, the idea here is to start with the end in mind. What is the data we need for a page? And so if I look at this page, which is a shopping cart, right? If I look at my shopping cart, what data do we need here? These are the properties of our field. Obviously, we have a bunch of shopping cart items. So there's cart items, individual cart items. There's a subtotal, there's a tax, there's an order total. And so this is the information that we would use to create our view model. If I kind of throw all that out here, here's our list of cart items. Remember cart items? This class is a domain model because this is a join table, as I called it yesterday. Okay, it's our join table. So we have to create this, a subtotal, a tax, a total, an item count, and a Boolean for is empty. So this is our cart view model. Now our cart controller. Let's import. We need using. So now, let's see, using one too many data view models. There we go. So we bring that in. So cart view model is now recognized. And as we go down a rabbit hole, now this is a domain model. So let's go back to our models and add a class that is a cart item. And cart item, if we go back to our UML diagram or we actually go to our database table, you'll see what a cart item has, but it has a product ID reference to the products table. So this is a foreign key, a product name, a price, a quantity, an image URL, and a total price is the price times the quantity. So obviously a cart has a list of cart items. Here is an individual cart item. A cart item has to reference a product we have in our database. Actually, if I kind of go back here. Hi.
And when you use that, can you come down?
Can we use a what?
When you get a second, can you come down?
Sure, it's going to be a couple hours. Is that right? Okay, cool.
You can take a break.
That we can. We will.
Sorry.
You're all right. But I'm just getting going. I'm not ready for a break. Let's hit the one too many database. This was my shopping cart demo. Tables. Oh, cart item is not mapped into a database table. Excuse me. This is cart item. Our join table is not cart item. I got that crossed. That's order items. Order items is our join table. Cart item is actually not reflected. You could put a not mapped attribute on this. Actually, you'll probably need to put a not mapped because there is no database table. So this is actually required. You need this not mapped attribute so that Entity Framework will not try and create a database table. There's no need for that. This is simply used by our view model. And let's bring in a using statement. So that's a recognized type. Okay, that brings us all the way back. All this had to go down the rabbit hole a little bit so that we can save a cart. Now our cart view model can be saved into session. And again, remember, it's HTTP context to save a cart into your RAM, into your server's RAM. And then I'm going to write another method to save the cart, right? So this is a saving cart operation. Let's write a method to read the cart. So if that saves it, here's another one to read it, right? So save cart versus get cart. Get cart will read the server RAM out of the server RAM. Remember, the way that session works is it creates a cookie for you with a session ID in it. So that's automated. The server will send that session ID down to the client in a cookie. And so the client sends that back to the server, sends that session ID back to the server, and the server will read that out on a per user basis. And if it exists, it'll read it out of RAM. Otherwise, it'll instantiate an empty cart. And now we're ready for our index method. So now that we've got a way to save a cart and to read the cart, let's just, when the user goes to the cart page, to the index method, let's just get the cart out of the RAM and let's send that cart to the view. Okay, so pretty simple. Now that we've created a way to save the cart, get the cart, let's then, now that we've got that, inside of a view, we're going to add a folder called cart. Rename cart. And let's create the index. Right click, add
View.
a view called index. And this is a strictly typed cart view model. Now the reason this data type isn't there is because our view imports needs a using one-to-many demo view models, right? Because our view models were not in models. If I would have made it a subfolder, I would have had to say models.viewModels. But now you can see now that's a recognized type. We can use a cart view model. Again, I'm not going to explain every line. I think you guys kind of got it by now. We got Tailwind classes, a little conditional. If there's a temp data message, display that temp data message. If there's temp data error, display that error. If the model is empty, then say your cart is empty, give them a link to add products. So if the model is empty, otherwise you're going to display the information in the model. And that's a big chunk of code to kind of look at what are we doing here. We're looping over, we've got some divs, nested divs. We have an unordered list. We're looping over each of the items. That's a cart item. We're looping over each of the cart items, displaying the image, if there is an image, or if there's not. If there's not an image, display one thing, otherwise display the image. Then you're displaying the total price, the product name, right? So we're looping over each product, displaying the product name, displaying the price. A little form here to update the quantity. We have to write this method, right? So if there's this is the cart controller, right? We need to go into the cart controller and allow them to update the quantity of that item. We need to write another method to remove that item from the cart. And then a little button to clear the cart. So some just different method calls, like 3 method calls. Update quantity, subtract quantity, whatever. Clear the cart. And then another div for your item count, your tax, your total, and a link to checkout to actually place an order. Okay, so that's a good chunk of the page with one last div at the very bottom that's just taking you back to the product index that says continue shopping. So just another link down here at the bottom. Okay, so that's cart controller. Now we should be able to at least navigate there, but we haven't actually saved the cart yet. Remember save cart. If I go back to my products, because that's how this starts to all link together. If I go to index, and here is my cart add to cart method. Okay, so to actually put something in the cart, which we haven't done that yet, that's where we need to actually write this add to cart method in my product controller. So we did a read operation before we did write. So let me go back to the controller. Not the product, the cart controller, excuse me. And I'll bring in my cart controller underneath index. Here's our add to cart. Now this comes from product. Remember, we'll be sending in a product ID and a quantity coming from this form. So here is our product ID. It's coming from a hidden field. And the quantity by default is just 1. We're adding in 1. So adding in a product ID coming from the hidden field, and the default, you're just adding 1 at a time. Okay, you can see what we do is we look up the product. So this is an important step, right? If you just follow along, send the product ID in from the form. This is coming from the product page. Send the product ID in, hit the database, look up the product, make sure the product is found, read your empty cart, see if that item already exists in the cart. If you already have that product, you're just adding 1 to it. You're just adding 1 to the quantity. If the existing item, if it doesn't exist, or if it's not null, if it does exist, then we just update the quantity by 1. If there is an existing item, then we update the quantity by 1. Otherwise, we add a new cart item with that product name, that product price, that quantity, and that image URL. So we are adding cart items, individual cart items, to the cart. We call save cart. Remember, save cart puts it in RAM. We save temp data that says that product is added to cart. So you should see that in the temp data message. And then we return a redirected action. So at the end of this, we go to index CSHTML on your cart. So this essentially loads your index CSHTML. Fancy way. It's a fancy way of, sending you to the index method, which the index method does this. This is our index method. Okay, so now we should be able to add an item, and let's save and let's see what breaks. We should be able to add an item to the cart, and then we should be able to see our cart. Okay. So products. Now, I've got my old one running still, so let me close that one down so I stop running the old one, because they're probably running on the same port. So now let me run this new one that I'm coding, not the finished product. Pretty easy to tell the difference because this one actually has product images. So /product, and if I click add, okay, session has not been configured for this application on request. Simple. I just didn't configure my program CS. Remember, there's basically 3 method calls to configure sessions and enable them on the server. And remember, the key thing on this is that you have to do this. This is all middleware, so the order matters. You can't do this out of order. Otherwise, you have to be able to read the data out of RAM before you hit the routing, right? So this kind of enables sessions on the server. And then we have to say app.use session after our static files, right? So brought in 3 lines here. This enables sessions, and then use session before map default routes. So that should begin to fix that problem. if I'm not forgetting anything. Okay, obviously we need our products link /product will take us there. Add, okay, there's our shopping cart. So we're reading from a view model. You can see that it is maintaining session state. If I went back, right, and I clicked add here, and it cleared out my cart, okay, that's what normally happens. Okay, state would not persist. But now we have session state enabled. So all good there. I'm gonna update my my nav links inside of my underscore layout. And this is product controller index. This will just say products. And this will ultimately be my orders. I'm going to have to change a little bit of that. Okay, so now we have products, add products, add. If I add the same one, the quantity is being updated because it's determining that the existing product is already there, so it just updates the quantity. All right. Couple more methods would be updating the quantity and clearing the cart. These are going to be in my cart controller. Methods are simpler. So let me start condensing these. Condense, collapse, I should say. On the cart index view, on the Razor view, we have a link already that calls update quantity. It passes in a product ID and a quantity from the form. Just to show that again. Here is a form that calls update quantity on the cart controller. It is a post method. It has a hidden field that holds the product ID, and it has a input name of quantity that sends in the quantity into right here, and that sends the product ID into right there. So that form sends that in. That's like the next chapter. The next chapter talks about binding the views to your methods by the name. So you're getting a little, okay, so get the cart, find the item by its product ID, update the quantity, save the cart, send you back to the index view. Okay, so that's update quantity. And then we have another link to remove an item from the cart. So pretty simple method here. Read the cart, read the product. If the product isn't empty, remove that from your items list. Resave the cart, redirect you to the index view. Right? So that's the update quantity. This is the remove link. So these two links right here, we've now coded the controller actions for those. Last but not least, clear cart. Let's clear the cart. Clearing the cart right there. Clearing the cart calls the HTTP context session remove method. Talked about that during lecture. Passing in the key, so you just clear out that key for that user and redirect you home. Okay. Now I'm just going to reboot because I wrote a whole lot of C# there. But let's just test our cart methods that we just wrote. By the way, making your own shopping cart from scratch is pretty cool. I think. Pretty geeky cool. But if I'm ever taking a web development course and you don't make your own shopping cart, what are we doing with? Anyways. Add a product. Add a product. Update the quantity. Click on update. Notice I did see the redirect, right? Update the quantity. Redirect. Remove an item. That works. Clear the cart. Browse products. Add. A simple fix would be just because you click add doesn't direct you to the cart. I think that probably just adding a product, you would just see the little piece there. Yes, Anna.
Is this like our own card that? Oh, okay, there it is. I was gonna say that in like regular shopping carts, you could in the detail section you could do the quantity there.
Yeah.
Say how much you wanted.
Yeah. So the next piece is we have to actually make an order, right? We've got a shopping cart. That shopping cart is saved into session state. Now we get to place an order, and that's where you actually tie in the user, right? The user has many orders. So we're now ready to place orders. Let me see what else I'm forgetting. I think that's... Let me go back here. I got to look at this. Index page, remove from cart, update quantity, clear cart. So there is a checkout method that says proceed to checkout. So if I go back to products, I click on add. So this is cart checkout method. Which is obviously not implemented. Let's take a break. I got 1:15. Let's come back in 15 minutes. So we are resumed, and what we're doing is we are coding the checkout method on the cart controller, and really just sending you to another page. If I go to cart controller, the one thing is we do want to be logged in at this point. I mean, you can build a cart and not log in, but if you're actually going to buy something, you should be logged in. So you've seen this before, but you put this little authorize, and that's really nice because if you're not logged in, it'll redirect you to the login page. So this is part of identity. Get the cart. Remember, this is really, when it says cart, this is a cart view model, right? And then send that cart to the checkout Razor view, right? So we need to create the Razor view under cart. This is cart controller. Let's add a view called checkout. Checkout CSHTML. And just as before, this is the same kind of cart view model. Okay, so kind of start out here, try and piece it together because there's a big old div on the outside. Fair amount of code, but I like to explain it piece by piece. So the first innermost div, the first child div, let's just bring that in. So the outer grid, the first div, we could see a method to place an order. We got shipping information and a text area for the user to just put in their address, right? So that's the one piece of information that was left out, is like we're gonna get address information. So you collect that here. Or if you're not ready to place an order, we give them an option to go back to the cart, which is the index method of the cart controller. That's our first child div, right? Place the order, link, back to cart, link, one or the other, you know, as far as what you could click. The second div, again, this is a big one. So I'll just bring it in. The second child div is really the rest of the code on this page. Starts here. Loops through the cart items, puts them in an unordered list. Each cart item's in a list item. Again, displays the image, the product name, a little razor quantity times price. So the quantity, it'll show the quantity, and then it'll show a little X, and then the price, and to give you the total price. Subtotal, tax, total. I almost don't love this because it goes from one screen to the next, and it almost seems like on this next screen we just collect the shipping information. I mean, I get it. In a shopping cart, it's very wizard-like. You get the product information, and then you go to the shipping information. I just don't have much shipping information, so it almost seems like we could just put the shipping information on the prior page and skip over this step, and then just give them a place order, right? So let's stop this, boot it up. Okay, let's just go products. Oh, by the way, I'm gonna have to log in, obviously. Add a product, proceed to checkout. We're not logged in. I don't have this styled. Again, just Tailwind this out to style it. And I have not registered a user. So let me go ahead and register my Gmail. Click here to confirm. Oh, we're going to go deeper into identity. And so for now, that's what it is. And I'm not auto logged in, right? So let's go ahead and log in now that I put that in there. Okay, now I'm home. Let's add to cart. Okay, we're still persisting our cart. Proceed to checkout. Okay, now we're logged in and we can get to this page. And we just got to code the place order. Back to cart link should work. Proceed to checkout, put in an address. Now we're going to actually write this method, the place order method, that is part of the cart controller. Now place order is a post. We have to be logged in to place an order. And this is a good method to go through. Because you remember, there's really two tables. There's the orders table, and then there's the order items, right? So order and order items. Because an order has a bunch of items in a list. So in the cart controller, high level, this is a post method, HTTP post. You have to be logged in to do it. This helps cross-site script, anti-forgery. It's a security attribute. You put them on your posts. Best practice. I see it all over the place. Notice we bring in the shipping address. That's the only new information that we got from our last view. It's an async method. Get the cart, right? Get the cart out of memory. Get the user ID, right? Because an order belongs to a user. So you guys have seen this line before. To read the logged in user, looks just like this. Make sure that there is a logged in user, of course. That's not too hard. Create an order object, right? The order object, remember the model has a user ID and a list of order items, a shipping address, a status, a total, an order date. So back to our, why'd I change? Cart controller, cart item. I'm crazy. Let's close that. Cart controller. I was on it. My gosh, I'm blind. Okay, create an order object. Pretty simple to create an order object. But now we need to add items to our list, right? Our order item list. Order items. So for each cart item in the items collection that's in the cart, add an order item, add a new order item to the order item list that has a product ID, a quantity, and a price. So again, remembering our order items, this is auto-generated. An order ID and a product ID are the foreign keys. So these are the important things that you need, an order ID and a product ID. Where's that order ID? It must be generated as part of the order object. It's going to assume auto increment that. Of course, it will auto generate order ID here. That's what it is. It's auto creating that. So an order ID will be created. And then it will be assumed on the order item appropriately. Okay, so we loop over the cart items, add each item to the list of order items. Subtract the quantity of available in stock and add the order to the orders collection. So to me, what's interesting here is you are adding an order to the order collection, and it will save both your order object and your order items object. It'll actually do saves to two different tables, right? And then clear the cart and redirect to the order confirmation page. So I don't have the order confirmation page coded, but nonetheless, let's add a product. I just want to show you how one save method will save to two different tables, because that's definitely new. products. Let's go ahead and add products, add. Let's log in with my Gmail. And products, add. I need to have that little cart icon. I don't have my cart icon wired up yet. Proceed to checkout. 25 Rankin Lane is my address. Place order. This crashes, but it should do the database save because it got all the way to the redirect. And notice the order ID is 1. So that's a good indication. If I go to my orders table, I've got my first order, today's date, the total amount, my user ID, and the shipping address. Status 0 means pending. And if I go to my order items, which is my join table, order ID is 1. So here's my order ID is 1. Quantity is 1, whatever that is, in my product. So I've got one quantity of product 1. I've got a quantity of 2 for product ID of 2. So our orders table is working and our orders items table is working. We are on the order confirmation page. So back to the order controller. Cart controller. Cart controller, order confirmation. We are almost out of the cart controller. Of course, to have an order confirmation, you got to be logged in. You send in the order ID. We look up the user who's logged in. We do a database lookup. We're looking up out of the orders table, with all of the order items, and then this is include the first order items table and the products on that order item. So this is like looking up out of 3 tables. This is like a join from 3 tables. You're looking up the orders table and the order items and the products associated with that order. So this is a join from 3 tables where the order ID is 1 and the user ID equals the user ID. And then return that order to the view. So order confirmation is a view that we need in the cart. Let's add a view. Order confirmation. This data type is an order object. Your order has been placed successfully. Thanks for your order. We'll just walk through. It's a big code chunk, but we'll just walk through it line by line. So here's model ID order number 1. So it's order number 1. Get the order's date out of the object. Get the status out of the object. Get the shipping address. This is a table, right? So it's an HTML table. It is showing you all the products, the quantity, the unit prices, and the total. So we're looping over our order items and putting each order item into a table row, into a TR. Then there's a footer, table footer, with the total in the footer, and then some links to go back to your products page or to your order index. We don't have this order index. That's a little bit more to go. So all that, now we should be able to see the order confirmation. I think 2 more things and then we're done. Products, add, proceed to checkout, log in, 25 Rankin Lane, place the order. Here's our order confirmation, order ID of 2, status of pending, continue shopping, view all orders. Okay, so I don't even remember coding this. Oh, you know what? This was coded on the first video like a month ago. The order controller. However,
Are these your orders?
well, that's what I need to look. Let's go to the order controller. And it's not. These are all the orders. See that? So let's update the order controller to get the
Orders
for the logged in user. So this, read the user ID and get the orders where the user ID of the logged in user, including the user and the order items. This needs to be an async method, which it is. What are you unhappy about?
I think it
Was
just
it
does that
purple?
until you build.
Until you build.
Yeah, it's not that.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. So we just refactored that to just, instead of, getting all the orders for all the users, which was there before, now we're just getting the logged in user.
Okay.
And so I only have one user, but when I create a second user, if I register my rankin.edu, okay, sure, click here to verify. Let's log in my Rankin account. I go to my orders, you can see it's empty, right? But if I log out and log in my Gmail, and I go to my orders, this guy has 2 orders. Again, I don't think my CRUD operations are where I want them to be, but it looks like this is all from before. This is all my, it does look like without the Tailwind, it's all working. Okay. The last piece to bring in here is that little shopping cart icon up in the nav bar. And I found a new way of doing this that I hadn't done before. And so I will admit, this is relatively new to me. But it's kind of neat. So what I did was I made a folder called View Components. Cart count view component. Let's add a class, cart count view component. And this view component has one method called invoke, and I need to add a using statement, which is using one too many demo extensions, using view models. Let's see. Oh, I need to inherit from view component. There we go. So I have a parent now, a view component. And because, let's just explain view components in .NET MVC. I think the idea is just making reusable components similar to, think of view components as a super powered partial views. While a partial view is just a snippet of HTML, a view component contains its own logic and data fetching capabilities. They are perfect for widgets or reusable UI pieces that appear on multiple pages, like a nav menu, a shopping cart summary, hello, shopping cart summary, or a login status panel. So instead of just, I guess the idea is instead of just having HTML, they have some actual logic capabilities like fetching data and writing some C#, which you can see. What are we doing here? We're fetching data out of our, well, not out of our, yes, it is our view model, but inside of our session state. It is a view model saved in session state. So ultimately, that's the item count is the number that we want to display in our little icon. So back in our layout, let's just close all tabs and let's just save everything. Save it all. Save all, close the tabs. So I can bring it back to our layout. So inside of this div, this is in our nav bar, so inside of this div here, but before the button. So remember, on small, extra small devices, this is hidden, but as soon as you're on a medium screen or bigger, you see this in a block level element. Here is my shopping cart. So this is here's a link to my cart controller. And in a screen reader, this will say view shopping cart. Here's the SVG of the cart. And then here, this invokes my cart count component. Cart count component. By the name here, the convention is this right here. This is my cart count view component. So if I stop, and so that's essentially going to get the shopping cart quantity out of the now views. There's one more piece that I'm forgetting here. Views, home, components, default, CSHTML. Because I haven't done this before, I remember there's one more piece. I thought there was 3 pieces. I showed you 2. And this is the third piece. I got to remember where it's at. So I got to look for views home component. Got to find views home. It's not there. Views shared components. That's where it's going to be. Views shared components. There it is. Cart count. There it is. One more piece that I forgot. So let's bring that in. So shared. Again, this is the convention here. We're going to add a folder called components. Add a folder cart count. Default CSHTML. Add a view default CSHTML. And this is just a little bit more, essentially, if you will, this is the shell. We've got an outer span, and then we've got an inner span, and then this just displays the integer. The int is the model, so that's the number, and then this returns the number. To kind of have an outer and an inner piece of CSHTML. Again, kind of like partial views, it says, but partial views on steroids. And there's our cart with a quantity. And as soon as you update the quantity, boom. Awesome.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, never mind.
Never mind. I enjoyed this one. I realize this is just a whole lot of me coding and not you guys. So thank you for allowing me to go through it. But I think making your own shopping cart is kind of a cool exercise that really brings a lot of things together. And hope you guys enjoy it as I did. I'll stop here. Any other questions? 1 hour video.